Thank you very much, Episurf, for that presentation, or presentations, I should say. We have a relatively lengthy Q&A session, so feel free to elaborate on the answers. I'm going to focus mostly on commercialization, but I'm going to start off by asking you, Paul. We've heard a lot about the product, the market, clinical validation, and so on. But can you just give a brief background on who you are and your professional journey to Episurf, and maybe even your passion working in this field?
Yes, of course. I started in the banking business, so I've been a banker for many years, and although that was fun, this is much more interesting, so I'll focus on that. And I ended up at Episurf as the CFO in December 2015, and became the CEO, interim CEO, a little bit more than a year after that. And I always felt that this company, this really works, and this will require some patience. Some funding, of course, and some strategy execution. But the product is really badly needed, and it really works well. So I felt that this has a bright future, and this is a good thing for society. We can create an excellent business out of this, and that's sort of the cornerstones of my passion for this. And it's been a great journey so far, and I think the next 5 years there will be even more fun. So simple as that.
And we're going to stay on that theme just for one more question before I broaden my questions. You are introducing a pretty new product to a customer base that is essentially very conservative, orthopedic or knee surgeons. And in order to do that, you have to have a very excellent team. Can you just elaborate a bit more on the people behind Episurf and why these people are the right people?
Yeah, sure. I mean, you have to be quite knowledgeable about what we're doing if you're going to work at Episurf, and needless to say, the people are very knowledgeable. I remember standing at this very stage a little bit more than 2 years ago at Capital Markets Day, that in the next years we will have to hire people that are better than ourselves. And I said, especially in my case, and we've added and broadened the team with Steve and Patrick in the next years, following that statement. So I would say they all have a great passion for what we're doing. Steve and Patrick doesn't leave Stryker because this is a cozy small company in Stockholm. Absolutely not. We're very serious about bringing this to the global markets, and I think I can speak for them when I say that they're truly passionate about that. And then if you look at, for example, the engineering team in Stockholm, there are a couple of people that have been with us now for many years, and you build a knowledge, and they all know, and I think I dare to say they all feel what I am feeling and what Patrick and Steve are feeling about the potential opportunities for this product. So all in all, strong knowledge combined with this passion you're mentioning about this. I think that's the key. That's characteristic for many people at Episurf.
And you are a commercial phase company, but looking back historically, your sales have been quite lacking, honestly. And at the same time, you have some ambitious financial targets. Can you just elaborate on what those targets are and maybe give some color in regard to your confidence in those targets?
Sure. I mean, first of all, there are some companies with smaller implants and maybe products for similar patient group that we are doing, and they started maybe even a year before us or 2 years before us, and they are at similar volumes as we are in terms of revenues. It takes time to bring something like this to the market. So I'm the first to say that I would love to see higher actual numbers. I mean, already now, but at the same time, we got to be. We got to understand that in many respects we are where we should be. And then the speed of that commercialization, as we go into additional markets, additional products, we will find more of these users are willing to adapt this quite early on, and then we also go into the established markets. So then I think, without giving any guidance, I think things will go faster. But when you look at the potential, we have looked at how many Episealers can a surgeon do per year, what kind of pricing can we have, what does the literature and academic science say about the prevalence of a specific indication, and then we come up with these numbers. And I think we haven't changed that much for many years. You can always twist and turn and round it off here or there, but overall, this is a big market. We know that, and if you look at someone like Clemens Kösters, for example, he is way above the average run rate that we are talking about. So there are both rooms for upsides and, maybe slightly on the downside. It's not an exact science because we have to create a total addressable market. But we are very confident that we are much more right than wrong there.
I mean, it surely seems that there is a clinical advantage of using Episealer, but you still have to be able to reach those centers and those surgeons. Do you think that you will be able to do so solely on your own, on your own, using your own salespeople and distributors, or are you prone to maybe branching out to a partnership?
Yeah, I will answer that question. We've said before that that's an option for us. I've also said before that we have been talking to the industry over the years. We've learned the hard way, so to say, that we were early on, and the feedback has always been get some more data and come closer to the US market. I think we have delivered on that. And during the pandemic, we have been keeping the industry updated. We met with many of them, but it's been over Teams. It's not really the same thing. And also, if you look at a partnership for us, what I would say is that we won't go into anything without making a good deal for the Episurf team and the Episurf shareholders, because we don't want to tie ourselves to one partner without getting some kind of reassurance in return. So for now, the strategy is to go with the channels you've seen us present today. But I wouldn't exclude anything in terms of potential partnerships. And it can be very attractive. And if it is, we would go for it.
And in your financial targets, you mentioned the 15% market targets some 2 years after launch. Are you looking into some sort of automation in the manufacturing, or how will you be able to cope with such high numbers in production with on a patient-specific implant?
Yeah, I will invite my colleagues to answer in common questions, but I'll take this one as well and say we have the game plan has always been to start bring production in-house at about maybe 1,500 implants a year. That could be soon. That could be in a few years' time. That's where it's beneficial to us. And there are specific parts in the actual manufacturing chain that would significantly improve our gross margins. So we would focus on that, and then parts like the sterilization coding might come later as it is more technically advanced. But on the software side, I'm sure Katarina can add a little bit that we're already doing quite a lot.
Yes, I think we have taken big steps forward the last years with the software we have and the process we have. So I think we are prepared for higher volumes. And
is that mainly feedback that you've gotten from your customers that has implemented those changes in?
Sorry, the customers?
Customer feedback. How do you work with customer feedback in terms of deliverance and the manufacturing?
When it comes to the manufacturing, I would say there is not much customer feedback. They kind of accept what we deliver. But of course, we have an ISO system, and we are constantly collecting feedback, complaints, any deviations or whatever feedback they may have. We are collecting that, and we are analyzing and acting on that to improve our processes, definitely.
But in the product development phase, customer feedback is crucial, of course.
Yeah.
And
Yes.
At the heart of what we do.
Yes.
And you talked about the PMA or the intended PMA process. Can you explain that? Because you had some lack in patient recruitment, and you made some changes in the protocol. How can you just elaborate a bit on those changes that you made in the protocol some time back?
Yeah, so this is not the first time. I mean, it's natural in these clinical studies that you do fine-tuning of the inclusion-exclusion criteria for the clinical study. So we have done this again now after again, interviewing all our, especially the US investigators, spoken to them to learn what challenges they see and if there is something they think we can adjust to facilitate. And then we have, of course, discussed internally and together with our regulatory consultants on what could be doable to do. And we did a submission now in September to the FDA and we have got it approved. So now we are in the stage of starting all the ethics applications that we need for the updated clinical protocol. So there will be an effect soon, hopefully, that they can start enrolling under this new clinical protocol, which will then be slightly broader indications. We will allow more, for example, when it comes to what previous treatments the patient has gone through, we will be a little bit more aggressive on that, for example.
So you seem then relatively confident still in the timeline for a US launch of Episealer.
So if you look at the first 510K products, I would say a high degree of certainty. I think the Epic Knee trial is delayed, but we're looking into about 2026 plus minus, and it's hard to say exactly when, but around that time should definitely be possible. Mm.
And then if we you're just going to stay in the US for some more. Can you elaborate on the pricing for all three products and its reimbursement statuses?
Sure. So let's sort of bracket those in two separate groups. For the two products which we spoke about as it pertains to the US mostly today, the patellofemoral product and the MTP product. One of the benefits, or one of the numerous benefits of these sort of 510K type of products is you're going into existing markets. So there's existing pricing, there's existing reimbursement. You're going in and your sort of sales tactics are much less category creation types of tactics, and they're much more sort of share gaining tactics. So it's much more sort of features and benefits types of selling interactions. That's a long way of saying that the pricing exists. We're aware of the pricing. We're comfortable of the pricing. It fits very well within our own financial models. We should have no real issues whatsoever when it comes to both pricing and reimbursement. These are existing, these are existing markets. We're just offering another product into existing markets.
Is that the same for Episealer?
The Episealer itself will be a little bit different. You do these high-powered level 1 type clinical trials, like an IDE trial. Everyone thinks of them as trials to get past the FDA, and that is certainly sort of the headline reason that you do these trials. One of the other reasons that you do these trials is you walk away with, then you own the data, and payers want to see that same type of data. So sort of a secondary function of those trials is then you can work within the medical societies to go then eventually get your own codes adapted that are implant and procedure specific. You can't go do that without your own insurance providers, Medicare and the commercial insurance providers. They all want to see these level 1 types of studies. So on the day of the literal day of the approval, there may not be the fully sort of baked in reimbursement structure in place. However, we will own then most of the data and can begin immediately sort of working within the appropriate surgeon medical societies to go ultimately get our own codes created.
And with the MTP and the patellofemoral product, they are taking the 510K route. Have you had to make any development compromises on those products to
well,
yeah.
Yes, some compromises, I would say, yes, but not too severe. I mean, we still believe that we will have a great product. However, I mean, it's not that easy to get through the FDA. You cannot get through with anything. You need to adjust to make sure you really fulfill what FDA sees as that you are substantive equivalent.
If I could just ask or get technical on a word here, compromise doesn't always necessarily mean, though, worse. I mean, it might mean a slight deviation from the existing European product, but some of those differences might be very sort of differences of opinion rather than differences in kind. And so while there have been a couple of differences that might have to be changed, there's no one walks away thinking that the product is any worse. It's just slightly different than the existing European product.
Okay. And once you're in the US, I mean, how do you make sure that you will not face the same slow sales ramp-up that you've had so far in the EU? Because that's an entirely different market than you have been active in for some years now.
I think one of again, it comes back to this established versus creating markets. And when you show the standalone Episealer device to many surgeons, that they'll first ask, well, they don't literally ask what is this, but they start to ask questions very quickly where you can tell they are trying to understand from the company how this fits in their existing, which of their current patients that this sort of fits within. With the patellofemoral product and the toe product, as soon as you show that to a surgeon, they will not think, well, what is this, or how do I use this, or for which patients is this intended for. They will immediately know, and again, the conversation becomes much more feature and benefits related than it becomes like patient selection, indications types of conversations. And those are just, frankly, faster conversations that you have. Those are back and forth types of things versus these, well, I'd like to talk to 3 separate people who have used it and followed it up. And the conversations, they sort of get down to business really, really quick about, okay, I see this. How is this better for me? And then you're sort of off. We don't have to, or won't have to, explain to them how this fits into their sort of current treatment paradigm.
And those surgeons, are they're not the ones who actually carry out the knee surgeries, are they? I mean, is there a synergy with those surgeons who are using the MTP and the patellofemoral, obviously patellofemoral, but also MTP joint once you launch Episealer?
There's no synergy really between the patellofemoral and the toe users, but there's complete synergy between the standalone knee device and the patellofemoral users. So
your launch there with that product is essentially you're starting to raise awareness once you launch with Episealer.
That's right.
Yeah. And in the EU you have inclusion in UK NICE guidelines. I'm just wondering if you could elaborate on how the opportunities would look like in the UK without NICE guidelines, and what other markets you expect to follow suit.
Yeah, I'm happy to take that. I mean, the UK NICE guidelines, it's a definite vote of confidence. It really helps existing users. It gives them some reassurance that they're doing the right things. But it's not necessarily a home run. We still need to work with payers. We need to work with our clinical teams to really build the business case for Episealer even in those markets. But other markets do still look to the UK. What are the UK doing from an evidence-based perspective? They still look to those NICE guidelines. So I'd say it's definitely a step in the right direction. It's building on our evidence base. It's building on our story about it being a successful procedure. And it'll certainly help with private insurance reimbursement. But I'm not suggesting that that's just, done and dusted. We've still got some work to do there.
Have you been able to practically notice some extra increase in interest after the UK NICE guidelines?
Yeah, so I mentioned earlier in the south part of the UK, we're certainly seeing an increase in pipeline, increase in scan submissions, which is positive, and definitely within the NHS setting, there's this reassurance that having UK NICE guidelines, it's often requested by trusts and NHS trusts to really have that as just to reassure the trust that they're doing the right things. So yeah, definitely.
And in the EU, we have the MDR, the Medical Device Regulation. How are you positioned for that change?
So we have our CE certificate for the knee implant and the talus implant valid until May 2024. So under the MDD, we still have our old certificates. And therefore, we have not yet gone through the MDR transition. We have a plan together with our notified body, so we have planned this for next year. So there will be a lot of attention to this next year and do this submission and go through the process. And also for the quality assurance system, of course.
I'm going to soon leave the commercialization questions, but just a final one. With these financial targets in the back of my head and the future that I expect could lay in front of you, how do you think that the organization will change from here?
So I mean, it's twofolded, and obviously we have a plan for our different cases we're working towards. But what's important in the sales organization is that we succeed with the independent distributors, both in the US and in non-US markets. That there's obviously both pros and cons with either direct or indirect models, but in the indirect model, we haven't really seen success yet, and as we do that, we can obviously gain a lot of efficiencies in our cost base. If you look at our P&L, then the investments we will have to make in the organization in Sweden, if you so like, is especially within the engineering team that's working on the damage marking report. I foresee some kind of subgroup, potentially not in Sweden, that's working exclusively on the damage assessment, and that will be a highly specialized unit and with a high degree of efficiency. And that team will definitely grow, but we have quite good forecast for how we will handle that to ensure a good gross margin in the coming years. So
Okay.
that's how we're thinking about it.
So just moving on to clinical documentation for a bit. We all know that without clinical documentation, you're not going to make it in medtech. Are you so far happy with the clinical documentation process that you have, or are there any missteps along the way that you can look back on and say, well, we should have done this instead?
No, no. I mean, we tend to look forward, but the Epic Knee trial. I mean, you would have loved to start that earlier. And Professor Ryd and I, Leif, we've discussed it many times. And what one has to remember when you have that, when you think about that backtracking decisions like that, is that in the beginning, Episurf didn't know that this worked. So starting the Epic Knee trial, let's say 4 or 5 years earlier, would have been would have come with a much bigger clinical risk in the eyes of investors and the then management, etc. So I can clearly understand that they really wanted to see that this works and it's well received by surgeons in Europe before you go into such an enormous undertaking that the PMA trial is. But with that said, of course, we would have loved to start it earlier. Then I think on the other clinical trials in Europe, I think we've done a massive amount of efforts with at a very limited cost base, and we have been quite efficient in our clinical work, and especially, I mean, we've been supporting clinical trials and giving grants, etc. But the big trials that you see in Europe being published now, they are investigator initiated and they're not ours, so to say. So we've been fortunate to have good relationship with people who want to use this and who want to try this, and that's been very beneficial from a financial perspective. So, you know, we look forward, but there are things to say, of course.
and apart from the Epic Knee trial, is there any other particular clinical data or that you look forward to the most? You have medium-term data, for example, but are you? Long-term data must be the next big thing for you, is it?
Yeah, I'll answer that one, and my colleagues can definitely add to this. But if you look at the milestones in the short term, it's the publication of the 5-year results that we've seen being presented today. That is the absolutely most important milestone in the coming months for us, and we're talking about months.
And then, of course, we have the Talus data coming in. We start getting 2 years data for Talus, which will be very exciting and important.
As Mr. Spalding said earlier, these first-generation implants failed. They failed early. So he's not really expecting any major deviances from the performance that we're having already. But of course, it's reassuring when you do have longer-term data.
Yeah, I can imagine knee surgeons really wanting the long-term data before implementing it more broadly. Health economic data as well, very important. How are you progressing on that point?
It's been resubmitted a few months ago now. I know we have talked about this for quite some time, but all we can say, we hope to have it published now, and I've said that before. So I understand that the credibility is low in this particular question, but that's the best to the best of my knowledge. It should be published quite soon, and it will hopefully show some good results.
Before I ask my final question for the day, is there anything that you would like to just clarify or elaborate on in my previous questions? No? Okay. Okay, so my final question before we wrap this event up, it's a pretty basic one. In the coming 12 months, what is the key priorities and focus areas?
So we tend to look at this in 2 regions, so it's US and non-US markets. So as I've shown on one of my slides today, how we're thinking about the growth in the coming years. So we need to see continuous growth in the customer base and then the activity level in Europe and the the Asian and Middle East markets. So that's absolutely a priority. Secondly, in the US, the 510K clearance for the Episealer PFJ in a matter of weeks or months, it's one of our biggest milestones ever, and the subsequent commercialization of that product in the US. So I think those two are the key activities for us in the next 12 months. And just around the corner from 12 months, we add the MTP product as well.
Perfect. Thank you very much, and I look forward to your next Capital Markets Day. Hopefully, we'll see some more exciting things presented.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Oscar.
Thanks.